seems like I'm bringing this up every episode because it's been on my mind, and I know it's on the mind of lots of authors who've been paying attention. We've had some recent high-profile exits by associate editors, I believe, who let us all know through social media that the industry could improve some things. Now, I know you and I are talking, what, 7, 8 years ago? Or no, longer than that.
Yeah. Since moving over to SNS. Oh, I started at SNS in 2012, I believe. Yeah. As an editor. Yeah.
And see, that's a reminder, esteemed audience, why I don't summarize other people's backgrounds. Look at what a mess I make of it. But I'm sure that, anyway, at that time, salaries were much different. But did you find coming in that you could do that job, just working that job, or did you need to get a second job? How were you able to make finances?
Yeah. I mean, I like I said, I've always done freelance work for hire writing. For a long time, I did freelance copy editing and proofreading too. And I had done that pretty much since I was an assistant on, and that was how I was able to, pay my rent and afford to do some extra things that I wouldn't have on just that salary alone. I think once I started at SNS, I really had stopped. I pulled back on doing freelance work at that point in time, and was able to, do just fine on my own salary. But yeah, I mean, it definitely was, not always easy to have to bring work home in the evenings and on weekends, and from my actual job, but also squeeze in freelance work on the side. So it was a lot of working, all of the time, pretty much. So I definitely empathize very deeply with everybody who's going through so much burnout right now. And it's something that really needs addressing. And I hope people are thinking about critically how to help folks in editorial, and to provide opportunities for people who are less privileged and who really, can't just survive on a meager publishing salary.
Well, if I gave you a magic wand, and I said, fix publishing, what are you going to do that takes care of the issue?
Well, I mean, gosh, it's, yeah, magic wand. I mean,
the premise of the question is you have that ability, and we're going to focus on publishing, but still.
For sure.
So to fix the larger world, let's focus on this one.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, in thinking about editorial specifically, I mean, I always say, I mean, an editor, anybody in editorial is doing at least 2 jobs, and oftentimes more. And their editors are doing the work. They're doing marketing work. They're doing, they're liaising with sales and publicity. And a lot of editors don't actually get to edit at work, and they're editing at home and on the weekends, and reading submissions at home and on the weekends. And so I think, to me, I think if editors were able to reclaim editing and reading submissions as their day job, I think that would be a huge help. I think at least then editors wouldn't feel, and everyone from editorial assistants to associate editors wouldn't feel as though, the task alone was impossible. And then of course there's pay. And I feel like, that either you scale back the work and pay appropriately for that, or you pay for the amount of work you're actually asking for, which is far more than, like I said, one job. So, I mean, I think there are a lot of different solutions potentially. And I think a lot of them involve, paying people what they're due for the hard work that they do. So, and this is something I talk about with my friends all the time, because it's such an ongoing issue. And I think anyone who's been there knows how tough it is. But
now that you are working on the agent side of things, that gives you a unique advantage, because you know what the editors are going through. I'm assuming you have lots of contacts within the big houses from your time there.
I definitely do empathize with what they're going through. When I send out submissions, I know that they have a lot on their plate. I spoke to an editor yesterday who said she'd received 500 submissions this year so far alone, which is astonishing. And so, when someone is not able to read something right away, I certainly understand why that's the case. And I know that it takes that much more effort to, get an editor's attention. So I think that's one thing that my editorial background helps with too, is really knowing how to position something for an editor so that they are going to want to pay attention to it more quickly than something else that might be coming through. I think that experience in working with marketing and working with sales and publicity really helps to sort of position a manuscript so that they can see how they might then parlay it to that team if they want to acquire it too.
And I should point out for esteemed audience who knows that we record these episodes and then they come out around author release dates. And so whenever you're listening to this, we're recording this right here at the end of April. So 500 submissions before even the halfway point of the year.
Yeah, I know. It's really incredible. Yeah, it's a lot. They're getting a lot, and there are a lot of agents these days too. So, you know, the competition is stiff. So I think the contacts are definitely helpful in my shoes right now. That's for sure.
So when we're talking 500 submissions, are we talking those are all agented submissions that get through to an editor, or those?
I believe so. Yeah, this was somebody at a house that I don't believe takes unagented submissions. So that was my understanding. But yeah. I know, it's a lot for sure. Yeah. So having an agent who can pitch you well is definitely key.
So I mean, you know, I always take a little bit of comfort in knowing that overflowing inboxes for agents are, you know, filled with a lot of people who just haven't done the work yet, or haven't listened to this show.
Yes.
And so they're not clued in, and they're not putting their best foot forward. And I feel confident that anybody listening to this show is head and shoulders above them, not going to have a problem. But 500 agented submissions, that's a little bit different.
For sure. And this was somebody who was relatively new to their company. And so I'm sure, you know, there are people who were really excited that they had somebody with a fresh list to submit to. So perhaps that's higher than other editors. You know, it's hard to say. But yeah, it's definitely not a joke. And explains, I think, the burnout to a large degree too, because it's just so hard to stay on top of that quantity of reading, especially when you're reading other editors' manuscripts that they're thinking of bringing on board, and you're working on your ongoing projects. Yeah, finding that space to read is a challenge sometimes.